I just spent $43 on things I didn't need while standing in a snowbank. And that's exactly why 77% of Americans will never escape being broke. Let me tell you what happened yesterday because it perfectly illustrates the trap we're all stuck in. I'm outside, freezing, trying to dig my car out of this massive pile of snow that the plow driver so generously left blocking my driveway. I'm angry, I'm cold, my hands hurt, and my brain, my intelligent, educated, supposedly rational brain, makes a series of spectacularly stupid decisions. First, I buy 2 hot dogs from a convenience store. I'm not even hungry. Then a pistachio raspberry waffle, because apparently I hate both my wallet and my body. Then, because I'm already in full self-sabotage mode, I go into a clothing store and buy 2 pairs of pants that were on sale. None of this was needed. Not the food in my stomach, not the clothes in my closet, but my nervous system screamed, "Yes, do this, soothe yourself," and I listened like the well-trained consumer I've been conditioned to be. I'll return the pants tomorrow. I wish I could return the food too, but that ship has sailed, along with those $43 I worked hard to earn. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, I would never do something that stupid, let me stop you right there. Yes, you would. Yes, you have. We all have. Because that's not a personal failure. That's the system working exactly as designed. Most Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 62%, according to the numbers that get thrown around in articles. But that's just the polite statistic. The number that still allows people to pretend this whole mess is about minor budgeting mistakes. The narrative that lets financial experts blame your morning latte habit for the fact that you can't afford a house. But it's not about lattes. It's never been about lattes. Sometimes it really is about not having enough money in an increasingly absurdly overpriced life where rent has tripled but wages haven't. Sometimes it's about those endless small purchases that seem harmless individually but devastating collectively. And sometimes, this is the part nobody wants to admit, it's about your lifestyle choices and the fact that you can technically be broke no matter how much money you actually make. Look at these numbers for a second and let them really sink in. Among different income brackets, 77% of consumers earning less than $50,000 annually lived paycheck to paycheck as of November 2023. That's expected, right? But here's where it gets interesting. 67% of those earning between $50,000 and $100,000 also lived paycheck to paycheck. And even among people earning more than $100,000 a year, 45% still live paycheck to paycheck. Let that land. People making 6 figures, people who, by any historical standard, would be considered wealthy or at least comfortable, and nearly half of them feel broke. They are broke in the ways that matter, living one emergency away from financial crisis. Even if you're technically above that statistical line, even if your income looks impressive on paper, you can still feel broke, or actually be broke, or just feel perpetually tight and trapped, either in a system that won't let you breathe, or trapped inside a mindset that won't let you keep the money you work so hard to make. That feeling, that constant low-level financial anxiety, is the background radiation of modern American life. We've normalized it to the point where we don't even question it anymore. They spent trillions to make you spend hundreds. Companies spend billions, collectively trillions, figuring out how to pull just a couple more dollars out of you. Not once, not occasionally, repeatedly, quietly, systematically, and forever. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is documented business strategy taught in MBA programs worldwide. Advertising spending alone reached truly insane levels. WPP Media's 2025 forecast puts global advertising revenue at about $1.14 trillion, and it's still growing into 2026. Think about that number. Over $1 trillion spent globally just on advertising. The entire purpose of this massive industry is optimization. Testing what messages work, targeting the right people at the right emotional moment. Tweaking prices to find the exact point where you'll say yes. This isn't about informing you of product features. This is about manipulating your behavior at scale. Your phone is the next evolution of the slot machine. Apps are deliberately engineered by teams of psychologists and behavioral scientists to keep you tapping, scrolling, clicking, and ultimately buying. Stores are laid out using sophisticated research to keep you wandering past maximum products before you reach what you actually came for. Checkout lines are strategically designed to catch you when your brain is tired, your willpower is depleted, and your standards are at their lowest point. Candy bars and magazines aren't there by accident. Everybody acts like this predatory system is completely normal, then acts shocked and judgmental when regular people can't manage to save money. The surprise isn't that people struggle. The surprise is that anyone survives this onslaught with their finances intact. The business model of keeping you broke. Here's the uncomfortable truth that changes everything once you see it. Broke is profitable. Your financial struggle is someone else's business model, and you're the product being sold. If you're calm, satisfied, and clear-headed about your life, you're a terrible customer. You don't impulse buy, you think through purchases. You comparison shop, you wait, you say no easily. Companies hate that version of you because that version doesn't generate quarterly growth. But if you're stressed, insecure, anxious, and convinced you're falling behind everyone else, you're absolutely perfect. You're the ideal consumer. You'll pay for convenience because you're too overwhelmed to do it yourself. You'll pay for status symbols because you need external validation. You'll pay for distraction because facing your actual problems feels too hard. You'll pay to feel like a real, successful, worthy person again for 5 precious minutes before the feeling evaporates and you need another fix. The system deliberately pokes at your nervous system all day long. It gives you just enough pressure to keep you moving and comparing and striving. Just enough anxiety to keep you reaching for your wallet as a coping mechanism. Then, and this is the really cruel part, it tells you that your financial struggle is entirely your fault for not thriving inside a setup that's actively, intentionally hostile to thriving. And people buy that story because it's familiar. It's also flattering in a weird, twisted way. If it's completely your fault, then you have total control. You can fix everything just by trying harder, being smarter, doing better next time. That narrative is comforting in its simplicity. But it's also a trap that keeps you running in circles, blaming yourself instead of seeing the larger game. Why you're really buying things. Consumerism isn't fundamentally about shopping or acquiring objects. It's about coping with feelings you don't know how else to process. It's emotional management disguised as retail therapy. A lot of non-essential spending isn't about the actual object at all. It's about the feeling you're chasing or the feeling you're trying to escape. People don't buy random stuff because they're stupid or irresponsible. They buy it because they're emotionally drained. Because they're bored and looking for stimulation. Because they're lonely and possessions feel like company. Because they're stressed out at a level they can barely articulate, and they're desperately trying to mute that stress with a quick dopamine hit. The truly depressing part is how incredibly fast the high wears off. You genuinely think you need the thing. The desire feels real and urgent. You buy the thing, and there's a brief moment of satisfaction. Then, you completely forget about the thing. The box sits in your closet or on a shelf like silent proof that you traded actual hours of your finite life for a mood change that lasted maybe 20 minutes. Do that enough times and you start living in a loop that's hard to break. Work to earn money, spend money to feel better about work, feel bad about spending, cope with feeling bad by spending more, repeat indefinitely. Work, spend, cope, repeat. That's not living, that's surviving on a hamster wheel. The mindset piece nobody wants to hear. I genuinely hate the word mindset because it's been completely corrupted by people who sell overpriced PDF courses with names like Abundance Blueprint or Money Manifestation Mastery, then act confused when you haven't manifested abundance by thinking positive thoughts. That's not what I'm talking about. Mindset matters for one specific, practical reason. It controls what you do when you're uncomfortable. When you feel insecure about your status. When you feel behind in life compared to your peers. When you have something to prove to that neighbor who won't shut up about his exotic vacations that you can't afford. If your default automatic response to discomfort is chasing feeling good through purchases, you're going to spend whatever you earn. The income level will never save you because the urge scales up perfectly with your paycheck. A nicer salary just gives you access to nicer ways to cope. Fancier restaurants instead of fast food, designer clothes instead of discount brands, luxury cars instead of used ones. But you still need the coping mechanism just as badly. The real shift happens when you can look directly at something you want, something marketed perfectly to trigger your desires, and you can just walk away. Not because you can't afford it, not because you're depriving yourself nobly, but because you genuinely don't need it to feel okay about yourself. You can notice the product, a beautiful jacket, an impressive watch, a sleek car, and not feel that subtle internal tug that whispers, "This will fix the broken parts of you." That tug is incredibly expensive. That tug keeps people broke for decades, building self-worth without buying it. A lot of people don't feel fundamentally like they're enough as they are, so they attempt to construct a presentable self out of purchased objects. If you grew up without much money, that urge can be absolutely brutal and nearly impossible to resist. I remember this friend I had years ago. He grew up genuinely poor. Not, we couldn't afford vacations poor, real poverty. There were at least 2 nights every week when his family went to bed hungry because there simply wasn't food. When he finally grew up and got himself through college, he became a software engineer and landed jobs at IBM, then Microsoft. With the very first real money he ever made in his life, he bought an $80,000 BMW that he treated like his beloved child. He wouldn't let anyone eat in it. I couldn't have cookies because I might drop crumbs on his floor. Did he need an $80,000 car? Of course not. Objectively, nobody needs that. A $15,000 car gets you from point A to point B exactly the same. But I understood why he did it. The first time you have money after years of having nothing, you spend it fast because it finally feels like you're catching up with the version of life you were promised. You're claiming your place. You're proving you made it out. Then you realize the devastating truth. The catch-up line never ends. There's always someone with more money. There's always a newer version of whatever you just bought. There's always a better aesthetic, a higher status level, another ladder to climb. If you keep chasing approval and validation through possessions, you'll stay on that exhausting treadmill until your knees give out and your bank account is empty. Being financially stable starts with a rude emotional truth that nobody wants to hear. You have to stop trying to buy self-worth from stores. The freedom of not caring. When you genuinely respect yourself and feel satisfied with your actual life, not the life you perform on social media, you stop being so easy to sell to. Not in a smug, superior way, in a practical, liberating way. You don't need to keep up with trends. You don't need to signal your status constantly. You don't need to pretend your life is cooler, more exciting, or more luxurious than it actually is. You can exist without the performance. You'll still want to do fun things because you're human and life should include pleasure and enjoyment. You'll still want to buy cool things occasionally, and that's fine. But you don't have to. That's the difference. The compulsion is gone. You can drive an older car without treating it like it's a personal tragedy or embarrassment. You can keep using a phone until it actually dies instead of upgrading every year. You can wear the same clothes multiple seasons without thinking you've committed a social crime that everyone is judging you for. That's real freedom. Quiet, undramatic freedom. The kind that doesn't photograph well, so nobody posts about it, but it changes everything about how you move through the world. And ironically, when you're not constantly busy trying to impress people who don't actually care about you, it becomes significantly easier to build useful skills, create income streams, and make long-term choices that compound. You spend less money and you think more clearly. You're not constantly negotiating with your impulses or justifying purchases. And in this particular economy, with all its instability and uncertainty, it's vital to keep your cool about impulses. The path out. If you want a life where money stops controlling your emotional state, where you're not anxious every time you check your bank balance, You've got to become someone who can tolerate discomfort. You've got to stop treating every anxious feeling like an emergency that requires an immediate purchase to solve. Most uncomfortable feelings don't need your money. They need your clear mind, your attention, and a conscious decision about what actually matters. You also have to remember, and this is important, that the system controls our lives far more than we like to admit. Individual choices matter, but they matter inside a structure designed to extract maximum money from you. The world is sliding in a pretty uncomfortable direction economically right now. So don't throw away your hard-earned money on emotional spending that doesn't actually improve your life. The harsh truth is brutally simple. If you keep doing exactly what the broken system wants you to do, consuming and coping and consuming more, you'll keep getting exactly what it wants you to have. Less. Always less. Less money, less freedom, less options, less security. I'm going to go return those pants now. And maybe think harder next time before I try to solve my problems at a cash register.